Welcome back to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson from Proteum Machining, and this week I'm joined by Tom Zelickman of Inspiration Metalworks. So, welcome, Tom.
Hey, thank you.
Uh, so we can get right into it. What is your company? What do you do? Where can people find you online, and they can jump on and maybe follow along while we go through
Yeah,
your story?
sure. My name's Tom Zelickman. I am the owner and operator of Inspiration Metalworks. We are a small-ish prototyping and small batch production manufacturing company here in North Carolina. Um, really kind of focus on we had been focusing on the prototype side of things and teaching, but I have recently gotten into a lot more on the production side, even getting into the semiconductor industry and things like that. You can find me at, I'm all over the place. I know you normally do this at the end, but so you can find me on Instagram, it's iMetalworks. I'm on Twitter, which really is just another feed of Instagram, so I wouldn't worry about that. Facebook, all that stuff. Really, again, Instagram is the place to be. And then my website is just inspirationmetalworks.com.
Awesome. Well, yeah. If anybody doesn't go follow you or doesn't follow you right now, they should head over, follow you, check out your stuff. So let's step it all the way back. How did you get into manufacturing? How did you get to where you are now?
Well, it's a long and winding road. Um, so I guess the short aspect of it, or the short story would be that I've always just been really good with my hands. I liked to work with things. I've been turning wrenches since I was a kid. Um, I bought my first car when I was 12, and it was a basket case, and it was a 1970 Triumph Spitfire, and I had a manual, Haynes manual, and some tools. Right? And so I've always been like that, where very very mechanically inclined, and so I was definitely heading down that path towards engineering and doing things like that. And instead, I joined the Army, and I went into the infantry and jumped out of airplanes and put all of that kind of stuff on hold for a long time because I just wasn't ready for that. But once I got into college and things, I started the mechanical engineering, going down that road, and still just couldn't quite wrap my head around the whole being an engineer versus solving problems and working with my hands and things like that. So I never really did go into the full engineering side of it, not at least not in that sense of things. I do product management and to that extent, so development and things like that, but not the pure like mechanical engineering. But what I did do was I picked up hobbies along the way, and turning wrenches, fixing cars, things like that. And it got to a point where I was working on, it was actually an old Volvo, of all things, a 1967 Volvo Amazon, or 122S.
Okay.
And I just couldn't find parts for it. And I decided that, I went to my wife and I was, complaining about stuff. And like she does, she said, well, I was talking about things. And she's like, well, so go do it. And really what she was saying was, I said, if I had a lathe, I could make this part. And she's like, so go find a lathe, go buy a lathe. And then it was, if you had a mill, and then it was, if I had plasma cutting. And next thing I know, the car is gone. And I've just got this, great hobby shop in my garage. And I started a YouTube channel and all this fun stuff. But really where my passion was in that, making things and creating. And I started watching, we always affectionately refer to them as the Johns. I've been watching them. And actually, I think I'm almost positive I had come across John Grimsmo on the Brick website when he was still doing Volvo stuff. But,
Oh, really?
Yeah, this years back. But and I just was really getting into this stuff. And again, I've got the right background for it. And my wife was just incredibly encouraging. And after the Army, I needed to stay busy. I needed to do something with my hands. I was not one that was just going to sit still. Um, and so it just grew and grew. And the more people found out about me, the more I found I was doing things for them. My first CNC machine was the plasma cutter. Then I converted a little mini mill. Then I got into the Tormox. Then I got the brother, the TC, like yours, the S2A.
Hmm.
And I just recently grew some more and got some big boy toys. And yeah, I'd say that's my rambling answer for getting into manufacturing.
That's pretty
Yeah,
great.
and that's the short story.
Well, it sounds like a lot of people in the community. You got there through cars and through liking to make stuff. I mean, I think my story is kind of very similar. I loved cars, and that's why I went into engineering because I wanted to make stuff, and then I got bored with all the overhead stuff. Like, why do I need vector calc when I just want to make stuff? And so that's a great story. I completely understand it.
Yeah, I was sitting in Dynamics going, really? This is how I'm going to spend the rest of my career?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking very similarly. Sitting, getting yelled at by some Ukrainian vector calc teacher. I was like, really? Like, I I I don't like you. I don't like this class. Why? Why? So it still ended up taking me an additional year to figure out what I was going to do. But I think we all get there eventually.
My calculus professor, um, he sounded like Marvin the Martian.
Oh
And
my
once
goodness.
once I put that together, I just could not. I couldn't hold it together in class. You know, I just keep imagining him trying to blow up the moon or something, and it just yeah, it wasn't working.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's go into why you bought your new machines. Split 141 wanted to know about your new lathe. I'm super curious about the machines you chose and why. What are they? Why'd you choose them? What's the cool features? All that stuff.
Okay. Well, I had been working on a project, and if you follow me on Instagram, you probably saw a lot of these things. But I had been working on a project for about a year and a half, prototyping deal with this guy. Well, I guess it's out now. So it's the Bow Bench, and it's this really cool stand for bow hunters. I was just floored by it. But like I had done for all my other prototyping jobs in the past, as we were getting to a mature enough state for this new product, I was preparing to hand it off to somebody else. It was like, okay, well, you're going to need 9,000 of these things, so let's make sure that you can get it because the Tormach. I mean, I can make 9,000 of them. It's just going to take me a really long time. And he looked at me like I was nuts. He's like, no, this is your job. And it kind of hit me. It was like, wait, what? And we started really thinking about it, and I started running the numbers, and I realized how much money I was leaving on the table by not taking it to that next step, by not doing the production work. And I kind of went back and I looked at other prototype jobs that I've done for folks, and some of them, were successful, some of them weren't. Um, and I just started looking at it, going, "Wow, how much money could I have made for myself?" And the light bulb came on of I've been up until that time I had been really good at making other people money, and it finally hit me that I needed to get better at making myself money. And so I started looking at, well, what's stopping you? And the first thing was, I had been gearing everything in my shop towards the prototypes. Onesie, twosie, maybe 25, 100 of something was like a big order. Right? Um, and I needed to up my game. At that point, I I guess I already had the brother. I still had the 440, the Tormach 440, and I had the Slant Pro, and I had the TC. And the TC was quickly becoming my go-to for all things milling, and I was using the 440 just for teaching. Because I say what you will about the whole Titans of CNC stuff. I love his approach to getting information out to folks because I mean I had to learn it myself, and so I actually host a small group here. Um, so but I realized that it was time. It was like, okay, well, I need to get some better machines that are more suited towards job shop work, real job shop work. So, higher mix, maybe some production stuff, but the idea would be to get the machines working without me, automate as much as I could. And so initially I was looking at this really, well, actually I started out looking at Haas. Um, I was looking at an ST20Y with sub spindle.
Hmm.
And because the idea was all of those parts that were, at least for the bow bench, all of those parts were going to be very easily done with really just two-axis lathe, but with a sub spindle, bar, a bar feeder, things like that. There was only one part that really needed live tooling, but even that could have been done in the mill. But I started there, and I ended up not going that route. Actually, so when I saw you at IMTS in 2018, I was shopping. Right? I was actually at that point. I think I was still looking at the little CL1 or the
Okay.
CL that they have.
Hmm.
But I was very much on board with Haas. I'd run a VF2. I had shared space with a another shop for a while that had Haas machines, and ultimately I ended up going with a company called Hwacheon, which is a uh, very well known company overseas, but not so much here. Um, there are plenty of Hwacheons in the U.S., but they're not quite as well known. Most times when you think of a lathe coming from Korea, you're probably thinking about Doosan, and so between those two, that covers the majority of stuff over in Korea. But Hwacheon's huge. Their campus is actually so big that Fanuc's campus is on Hwacheon's campus. They have their own foundry. They make the robo drill bases, or the and the I want to say that some of the bases for the Fanuc robots.
Oh wow,
Um, they make engine blocks for I want to say it's Hyundai,
that makes sense. They're
right?
Korean as well, or
Yeah,
Kia. I mean, I guess they're similar.
yeah. So huge company. But I ended up going. In the end, what I decided was I well, I wanted probing, darn it. But in the end, what I wanted, what I needed, and what I would benefit most from was not to go all in on a multi-axis lathe, but rather to get a basic lathe that I could automate and a newer mill with a little bit bigger travels. And so I ended up getting the Hwacheon, a Cutex 160. So volume wise, it's a little bit bigger than the Tormach as far as cutting envelope, but it's night and day. Between the Rapids, it's a 20 horsepower motor versus the 3 horsepower Tormach. Um, tool changer. I mean, the whole thing is just you can't really compare the two. Um, and then I went for a mill. I went down the route of Hurco. And both of these machines are sold and serviced by a company near me called Crotts and Saunders. Um, they were, of all of the vendors around here, so I mean, Haas is not far from me. There's an HFO in Greensboro, uh, and there's Doosan's not far. There's a bunch of stuff near the Charlotte area, but it was the guys from Crotts and Saunders that took the time to actually understand what I was trying to do and looked at the long game. The Haas guys, they'd give me information all day long. They would talk if I chased them down, but and Yamazun's folks were that was an 8 hour drive to get out here from their closest location.
Oh wow, yeah. Because I know
Yeah,
last time we talked, which was I don't know 8 months ago, you were looking at a S1000. I want to say.
yeah, I was close, um, especially when I um, when I was having some problems with the TC, which ended up, by the way, it ended up just being gummy limit switches. I
Yeah,
just
that
needed
was
to
my
clean
problem
the limit
too.
switches. Yeah.
Mine were disgusting, and it still was working, which was insane. I mean, there was probably 2 pounds of chips packed in the Z limit switch area,
Hmm.
and it was still working fine. And I think one day I was taking one off, just like, oh, I'm curious, and then I was like, oh, okay, I've got to clean the entire machine now.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, there were no chips in there. It was from coolant.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's how I ended up with these machines. And I'm glad that I did. I'm really pleased with it. I mean, I love my brother, uh, and it's a great machine. It can do all kinds of things. I mean, I know a lot of folks think that um, this style, a BT30 machine can't really handle heavier stuff, but I know you're doing stainless and titanium, and I've been doing a bunch of steels lately, and it's a different cutting strategy, but the removal rates, amazing on it, and it's just things like, and I know you've run into this with your TC. Um, I'm trying to do a changeover, for instance, and it takes me forever to swap out all the tools and get everything ready to go, and there's no probing, so I've got to check all that. And oh yeah, this does it's zero from the table. That was a fun one to figure out.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I almost put an insert drill right through my vise the first time I went to prove out some code on this machine.
Well, I remember I reached out to you when we got our TC because I had no idea what was going on. I was like, I don't know how to set tools. I'm so confused because everything's backwards. And then finally, I got my head wrapped around the reverse nature of it. Thankfully.
Yeah, but that was really it, right? It's that reverse nature, and once I figured out that I could still use a Heimer to do a lot of that stuff, Heimer, I have no idea how to pronounce that, but um, that helped quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's like realizing it's like, oh, well, if I just move this tool and set its height offset, or have it call up its height offset, I can then go ahead and pick up my Z right from this. So it's almost as good as having a probe, but I want things like uh, wear detection and in-process probing and things that I know I could have gotten on a newer machine, right? Regardless of which kind of machine I got.
Totally. Yeah.
But yeah, the goal is faster turnaround, faster setups. Um, get get faster while also getting more accurate. Um, so
So I
that's
might have missed it. What Hurco did you get, and what's the options on that thing?
I got a VM10i, so just standard 3-axis machine. It's not their smallest model. It's their probably most selling or highest selling model though. Probably in the same class of about a VF2 size.
So
Um,
it's a 30 by 20, or
28 by something like that.
okay.
Sad thing is, I'm staring at this thing right now. It's still not on.
Well, we can go into that in a second because I
Yeah,
know that's
I
a
know.
big
That's
hurdle
another.
you're overcoming.
Yeah, but so options. It's got spindle chiller, 12K spindle. It's got a. Oh, that was the other thing that I was pretty insistent on both of these machines was chip augers or chip. This one has a chip conveyor. Um, what else? Um, DXF import. The control on the Hurco is pretty impressive. And that's the one thing I love about the Tormox. I mean, PathPilot. If you've ever run a Tormox, PathPilot is so easy to use but super powerful. And when I did a 2-day training session at our local Hurco dealer, and to me it felt like PathPilot on steroids. I mean, I could do so much more, so much better. I mean, 9,999 tool offsets in the tool library.
Wow,
Yeah, yeah,
that's crazy.
yeah. And I pulled in some G code that I just used the generic. No, actually, I grabbed the Hurco post for Fusion, and I pulled in some G code, or I pulled in I'd programmed it for the brother, but I just used the post for Hurco, pulled it in, and the preview, it looked like the preview that comes out of Fusion. I mean, it showed me everything it was going to do. It showed me the stock. It showed me how it was going to remove the stock, every step of the way. And I'm just sitting there looking at this like, holy cow. Um, yeah, so I'm pretty pleased by it.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
But I think the next big training for me is learning FANUC control for the lathe. That'll be that'll be fun.
Yeah, coming from a Tormach and then a brother, they Fanic is you'll get it. It's just more button presses to do the same things, more or less.
Yeah, I'm excited though. You just gotta get to that point.
Yeah. So is your Hwacheon boxways still? Because I looked at one, I don't know, 6 months ago, a year ago, something like that. There was one relatively locally on Craigslist, and I was actually pretty impressed with the build of the machine and all that.
Um, it is solid. Um, it's probably the same size as the mill. In fact, I've had to completely rearrange my shop around in order to accommodate these new machines. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. Is it boxways? That's a good question. You'd think I would know the answer to that.
I think you've got a lot on your plate, so I don't blame you if you don't. Um, I'm wondering if I can look it up real quick.
I know. I'm looking at the catalog for it. I mean, all
So it's
kinds of
a
stuff.
160A.
Yeah, I got a 160A.
Nice. It looks like it's got a fairly new Fanic control on it too, at least on their website.
Yeah, it does. And I'm trying. Like, I didn't realize. I don't know how I missed it, but I didn't realize that it comes with a hydraulic tailstock. It looks like it's all programmable and everything. I didn't even. I've never had a tailstock on my lathe before. I mean, I had it on my manual lathes, obviously, but I wasn't even thinking about it. And it gets here. I'm like, oh, it came with a tailstock. Look at that. And then I could see the clamp where it'll where the carriage will grab it and move it. So it's kind of neat.
That's
Um,
really cool.
yeah, it's a really it's an impressive machine. I I make some I make these GPS antenna mounts, and I realized that because I have to do lathe and mill for these mounts. It's for heavy equipment. This big, 3-inch chunk of steel. It's getting turned, and the Tormach's it does a great job with this thing. I drill a 7/8. I use a 7/8 insert drill in the Tormach. And
Really?
I
Wow.
basically pre-drill, and then I bore it to size. It's got a 40 millimeter bore, uh, and I end up doing that. Basically on the lathe, it's two ops on the lathe because I'm basically bring it to size and things like that. And the Tormach, oddly enough, I was babying it too much, and when I started pushing it, I'm doing what 700 surface feet when I'm doing the boring operation.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. Well, overall, it takes about 3 minutes per. That part of it, that operation takes about 3 minutes to do. On this new lathe, I can use an inch and a half uh, spade drill, right, or insert drill, and basically just drill the hole and then slide it over a little bit and take it to size because it's like 1 inch 578 or something like that is 40 millimeter. And the whole process is going to take me like I want to say it was when we because we did it at the at the keep wanting to say HFO, but it's not the HFO. At Cross and Saunders, they had another lathe there, and he showed it to me. He showed me how it would work, and it was under 30 seconds
Wow.
to do the whole thing. It was one tool to do. I mean, so you still have your facing and chamfers and stuff like that to do, but I mean, it was shocking how fast it could get done. Um, so yeah, I'm excited about this lathe, and I'm a lathe guy. I really am. Getting the mill going has been harder for me than getting lathes going. Um, so I like turning.
Awesome. Well, speaking of lathes, T5 Manufacturing asked your thoughts on the Slant Pro, your favorite thing, the worst thing about it, all the details.
Start with the worst thing about the Slant Pro. Cleaning the darn chips out. Cleaning that enclosure is a pain, especially when you're doing production work like those mounts. I was taking a lot of material out of this steel, and about every 10 or so, I have to stop and empty out the chips. So I was insistent that the next lathe was going to have a conveyor. Um, Overall, this lathe has never done me wrong. It is a solid machine, and for the price, it's been great. I was really happy when they did via software update. They changed the rapids from 60 inches a minute to 100 inches a minute. But it's a stepper driven system. You can push it too hard, you will lose steps, plain and simple. But when you learn the lathe, it can deliver some amazing results. I was actually shocked the other day. Tormach actually reached out to me because they wanted to share one of my posts. I do a smallish job. It's a recurring job, but it's for a company that makes weightlifting equipment for like World's Strongest Man competition, stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
And there's this part that I make where it's a crank. I make the handle and the pin. I don't currently make the arm, and that makes it even more complicated. Because I don't make the arm, this pin gets press fit, or sorry, heat. It's a heat shrink fit in there. So they heat up the arm and they drop the pin in, and then it cools almost instantly and locks in place. And then they put a pin in to lock it. Like I want to say they press in a roll pin perpendicular to it, so it can't go anywhere. Well, I have to hold a couple of tenths on that, and I really say that Tormachs can't hold tolerances, and it's absolutely not true. If you learn the machine's personality, you can do whatever you want with these machines. So yeah, I'm actually a little sad. I'm going. It's actually technically already sold, but yeah, I need the space, and so the Tormach and the brother are both going to a new home.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yep. So
Well, that's understandable. You got some hot new equipment to try.
the thing is, I wouldn't actually get rid of it otherwise. If I had the space, I would keep it. If that tells you anything, I've got this nice new lathe, and I would have kept the Tormach lathe. The 440, I could see, I let that go a while ago. That one had just become for teaching and nothing else. I tell you, it's painful letting these two machines go. I really have grown attached to them. I mean, but I have to run my business, and these are tools for the business, and I have to think like that. But it's hard not to have an emotional attachment to these machines.
I totally understand. Yeah, we're looking hopefully at selling the kitty here soon, and both Brad and I are like, oh, but it's our first machine and we love it, but
Mm-hmm.
we need the room and we need the space and all that stuff. So
A year later.
yeah. So you kind of already answered this, but Craig Camp asked, what persuaded you to make the leap from where you were to purchasing new equipment and headed towards a fully equipped machine shop? So you're, upgrading, you're going
Yeah.
towards more production and just more well equipping yourself. Is there any other
Yeah.
stories or instances you can think of that made you head this way?
This is probably a loaded question because Craig is one of my mentors. I didn't know he sent this question in, but yeah, he's a good guy. So one of the things that I did along the way is when we talk about persuasion to make the leap, it's not just about the emotional side of it, right? It's knowing that you can actually do it. And so there's two bits of advice that I had gotten over the years. The first one was from an old friend of mine, Scott, and he owns a construction company. And he basically said, you keep doing your day job until it's costing you money to keep it, right? So like keeping the day job is costing you money rather than earning extra money. And the other piece of advice was coming from Craig, because I could have, and I was very close to pulling the trigger on that other lathe over a year ago, and it would have. I'm sure I would have made it work, but he cautioned me to take a more logical approach and a more methodical approach to making these decisions. And so I sat down and I did a decision tree. And I'm not sure if people are familiar with this kind of thing, and it's used in the intelligence agencies quite a bit as well. But so basically, you start to look at decision making from action points or triggers, right? So if and when I see something happen, then I'll move towards this other reaction sort of thing. And so I started looking at how much work was coming in. I started looking at how much time it was taking me to get the work done. I started looking at profit margins and actually charging a profit margin as opposed to just doing work for folks. And when those things started to line up, that's when you start to look at it and say, okay, it's time to make some bigger decisions, and it's time to pull the plug on, say, doing the day job and going full time, or purchasing new equipment or things like that. And I find it helps me sleep at night, because I know that the decisions that I'm making are based on data. It's based on facts. It's not, and I can be a very emotional guy when it comes to things like this. And it's like, oh, I want to do this cool thing, and I love the way that it makes me feel when I'm doing this. And but when what it boils down to is I'm married. I've got two kids. I'm the income, and I have to make sure that I'm making good, solid choices. Because as you heard, my wife is very supportive. And
Yeah,
she'll,
seriously.
she'll push and yeah, do it, go for it, do these things. She's my biggest cheerleader, and actually, even the name of the company is a nod to her. It's not about this other stuff. I mean, my wife's name is Persian, and it's like it means inspiration, or I mean, it's even stronger than that. It's more like my reason for being. Um, I, but in the end, um, I knew I didn't necessarily need to make decisions based on people cheering me on. I needed to make decisions based on reality, of, hey, how much money really is coming in? How much money do I have booked? How much, what's my pipeline look like? As far as the next month, 2 months, 3 months. And so one of the things that I looked at was, I basically said, okay, well, once I can hit X dollar a month or X dollar amount for 3 months in a row, I will consider, I'll start looking at some of this other stuff. And once I hit 6 months in a row, then I need to start taking an equipment purchase more seriously. And once I hit a year of X amount, and it starts to look like, hey, I'm at 70% of what my day job is bringing in, but realistically, I'm also working 40 hours a week at the day job and 40 or 50 hours a week at the machine shop. It's like, okay, hang on, what's going on with that? Why is this? And you start to put these pieces together, and it's a big chess game. But if you take the long game, you find that your decisions, you really do, you have a clear conscience, and you go, okay, yep, this is the right way to go. I know there's a lot of guys who just dive right in, and I've wanted to be that guy. Trust me, Craig's talked me off the cliff a couple of times. But for me, it's much more methodical, because I know for a fact I could just hire somebody to work these machines, and I could just keep doing my day job, and still bringing in that money. Or I could hire somebody to go out and drum up sales for me. I could manage my business, right? I don't necessarily need to make that leap, or I don't. Heck, I didn't even really need to get new equipment. I could have used Xometry. I could have set it up to Proto Labs or any of these other places. I could have farmed the stuff out and just been the middleman. But I know in my heart that I want to be doing this stuff and I want to be involved in it. And yes, I'm going to run my business, and I know I'll need to hire people and things like that. But the first step was being able to have those machines and building it out. Like I got a surface plate. I started saying, okay, well, if I'm going to make better parts, I have to be able to measure and be able to go one step further than what I'm doing before. So I just very slowly started whittling away at these little pieces here and there. And next thing you know, here I am.
That's awesome. That's yeah. I definitely understand all of the the emotional heartache and struggle that you're going through, and I really respect the the logical way you're going about it.
So let me flip it around on you for a minute, because machinist Brett had asked me to ask you if you're doing any of those things. So Brett lives local, and he's one of these guys that um, helps with teaching here and stuff like that. And I, great guy. Um, but he wanted to know, because he's an avid listener as well. He wanted to know what kind of goals, or how are you getting to the point where you're making these decisions? Because it sounds like over the last few months you've really like that light bulb has come on for you, and you said, okay, I'm getting close to this. What kind of things would you say to him?
Uh, it was kind of a confluence of like reaching my I don't want to say breaking point. Like I could do this for another few years, but like realizing that, like you said, it's starting to cost me money to not go full time. A good friend of mine, and I talked about it, I think, a few episodes ago. A really good friend of mine owns a decent sized LED lighting business in Chicago, and like we talk all the time. And he recently really came down hard on me and was like, "Listen, you need to go full time. Like you're not realizing the opportunity cost that you're costing yourself by not going full time." He's like, take what you're making right now per week. Like, do you like what's the likelihood that you'll be able to make that more per week, having a full 40 hours there in the day when you can get stuff done? And I was like, 80-90% easily. And he's like, what's the worst thing that can happen if you fail? Like I don't have, I've got a fiance and no kids. Like, it's um there is very low stakes as far as that. Like I could fail, we could go under, we could sell off all our stuff, and then I could go back and be in the job pool. And he's like, and on top of it, if you're back in the job pool, now you've owned a business and you're in line for, being a manager or something like that. So it was really it was just eye opening that like, what's stopping me from doing this? We have really excellent customers, a really great quality track record with all of them. I know that if I had more time in the week, I could actually start doing this, door pounding that I've been wanting to do. Like there's a bunch of companies in town that I've been wanting to reach out to for a long time, but I knew I just didn't have the bandwidth for it. And it's coming down the line where my happiness and like me being fulfilled in my company and outside of my company is more important than kind of playing it safe at this point.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of those things too where risk aversion, I think, is the biggest barrier that people run into on going off on their own, right? I mean, the only thing that's really holding you back is yourself. So yeah, I think it's been kind of exciting, because I think you and I, in a lot of ways, it's like I got the brother a couple of months before you did, or maybe it was about 6 months before you got yours. And yeah, so I'm in some ways there, I'm a little ahead. In other ways, you're far ahead of me, and things like that. Although I'm probably, gosh, 15 years older than you, something like that. So I've got a lot more time in the workforce and things like that. So it's a pretty big jump. But at the same time, you're right. It's like, what is it costing you by not doing it?
Yeah. Yeah. And like
So
he was like, imagine that the other point he made is, imagine you're not only making your salary's worth more a week, but like double that. Like think of all of that money that you could have had for the last 2 years saved up. That's another machine, or that's a, a machine and a vacation for you, or this and that. And like he's like, you are costing yourself so much more money. And he's been pushing me. I don't know, once a week when we talk. He's like, I pick up the phone. He's like, "So have you quit yet?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that yet, but like I'm getting close."
That's a good person to have in your corner, though. It really is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he I wouldn't say that he plays it fast and loose, but he is always very like gung ho about like, oh, I just get whatever I need to do done, and like he understands risk, but like he is much more gung ho than I ever would be, and so he's a great balance to like my very risk averse nature of like, no, I need to have it all planned out to the nth degree. And so he pushes me, and he's like, okay, well then plan it out. Stop lollygagging and actually have a plan. Then don't just say like, oh, I'll go full time sometime.
Yep. I think that's one of the things that scares me the most is that people have so much faith in me, and I'm constantly questioning myself. They're like, "Look at all the things that you've done. Why are you worried about this?" And I was like, "Well, I'd like to keep food on the table for my kids." Um, but in the end, it's fear, right? Fear will stop more people than anything else. Um, so, yeah, but cool. Sorry, I know I flipped that around on you.
No,
But
I appreciate it. It's definitely big in my mind lately, especially at work. It's become tougher and tougher to struggle sitting there stressing about things I have to do after work when I know that in a you know however many months it's going to be it's going to be my day to day, and I'm excited for that, but it's very tough to be split between those two worlds for so long.
yeah, yeah, I know that feeling. This is for us. I want to say I officially started the business 8 years ago, 9 years ago.
Oh wow, okay.
It's taken a lot of turns. It used to be much heavier on the fabrication side of things, um, and now the plasma cutter is a tool in the arsenal, but it's not necessarily my go-to anymore. And my welding stuff is just kind of stuck over to the corner, but
Hmm.
I use it from time to time. I found that I'd rather partner with people who are really good at what they do than try and do everything myself. So I found a guy. He's local to me. He lives like 3 miles away, and he's a phenomenal welder. On Instagram, he's Outreach Fabrication. Uh, I share some stuff from his from time to time. So anytime I need welding done, I go to him, and it's worked out really well. He turns to me for machine work or plasma cutting, and it's been a really nice way to have to expand without necessarily hiring somebody or forming any partnerships or things like that. It's just based on mutual respect.
Yeah, totally. I do the same thing with lathe work right now, and we've got a really good welder, two welders actually that own a business together locally, and they do really high end titanium and Inconel, and they're welding liquid oxygen tanks and things like that. And it's like, oh man, I'm happy to give them the work because they really know what they're doing, and I definitely am not that good. So I
Yeah,
completely agree. Like if you can find a good partner to take on the stuff that you're not comfortable with or that you're not an expert in, definitely do it. So Triple Caution Machine Works asked, "What's been the biggest struggle you've encountered with your recent growth? What is something that you thought would be a challenge which turned out to be easy?"
Um, hmm. Let's start with the thing that I thought would be a challenge that turned out to be easy. Um, there's all these. Everybody talks about how either it's impossible to get three phase where they live, or they had to jump through all these hoops and do all this stuff. And I had built it up in my head that getting three-phase power to my shop was going to be this nightmare. I thankfully do not live in a neighborhood anymore. Um, I used to, when I first started the shop, I was living in a neighborhood with a very strict HOA and all kinds of things. But I had the cool garage in the neighborhood that all the guys wanted to hang out in, as opposed to being a nuisance. Now I don't. Now I've got, gosh, it's almost 1,600 square feet, but it's split between two buildings, and one of those buildings is 100-year-old. Uh, it's the pack house. It's the old barn that they used to dry the tobacco in. So wood floors, can't really put machinery in there. So I had really thought it was going to be tough. It took me a phone call. I called up Duke Power, which is our local provider here, and said, "Hey, I've got this existing structure, and I'd like to get three-phase power." And they're like, "How much do you want? 400 amps, 800 amps?" And it's like,
Oh my goodness.
it's like 200 is probably fine. And they're like, "All right, well, let's open up a ticket, and I'll create an account for you, and I'll have an engineer reach out to you." And then the engineer, within a few days, the engineer reaches out to me, and he comes out here, and he looks around, and he goes, "Yeah, I can get you three-phase. I can't get you three-phase here." I was like, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Well, hang on." And we walk around the building a little bit, and he looks over at the road, and he goes, "Well, that's three-phase running right past your building here, so it shouldn't be too hard. How much do you think you need?" And already I'm just like, "Wait, what?" Uh, and so, he goes, "All right." So I'm like, "Well, it's probably 200 amps, and he goes, "Okay, well, either way, you have to fill out this load form, get your electrician to do this. And this is going to be the big challenge that I didn't think I was going to have. Um, I couldn't find an electrician to do this stuff.
Really?
Everybody, well, with COVID and, there's
Oh,
so much growth in this area. I just couldn't find an electrician. Um, I have a very good friend who owns a company, and he said he would take the work on. And he was, it took me a month before I finally called him because I knew he was swamped, and he lives a little far away. And I reached out to him. He goes, "Well, I can at least help you with your paperwork, and I'll find somebody for you." And he set me up with a great guy. And eventually we got there, but the load rating on it was going to be 400 amps. Now, this was assuming I was keeping all my machines so that they were going to be running 24/7. And I'm like, "Well, I'm definitely not going to do that." And he goes, "Duke figures out how much they're going to charge you for the install based on how much power they think they're going to sell you over the next 3 years."
mm-hmm.
I was like, "Oh, 400 amps. Okay, right." So it didn't actually cost anything to have them bring the power in to the building. And I have 400 amps of power that's still not connected yet because
Oof.
of little things. It's not the power company. The power company is eager to help. It's little administrative stuff that's been the challenge. And so right now I've got the new panel in. I think I put a couple of pictures of that up on Instagram recently. We've got to disconnect this building from the house, so we've got to time all these things and get the meter installed and all this. So I'm expecting Duke to actually break ground on putting the pole in the next couple of weeks. Until then, I'm just using my phase converter still, and I'm able to do a little bit. The new machines will get commissioned. I want to say it's the week of the 8th. Finally.
Wow. Oh,
But,
that's soon.
well, it's soon, but I've had them here since the 12th of December.
Oh, that is the worst Christmas gift ever.
Yeah, pretty much.
Here it
Uh,
is, but you got to wait a month and a half to
I have
unbox it.
I have been working around these machines. It will have been more than 2 months by the
Ugh,
time I finally get to use them. 2 months. But
that
it's
is
given me
rough.
time to collect up tool holders and start getting things together, and so it's not all bad. It's just, you're right, it's the worst Christmas present ever. You're just staring at this thing like, "Oh my god, I just want to press the button."
Oh man, yeah, that is rough. But that's awesome that it's so soon. I'm pumped for you, and I can't wait to see you power them
Yeah,
up and get to run some parts and all that stuff.
Maybe I'll get back into making some YouTube videos again. I've been down to about one a month, although I went several months where I didn't do any at all. The last year or so, especially because I was doing a bunch of NDA work, and I still am doing a bunch of work that's under NDA. So I have to be real careful what I record and when and things like that. But I've noticed there's not a lot of stuff about the Hurcos, and there's almost nothing on these Hwacheon machines out
Yeah.
there. So thought, okay, well, one of the criteria I typically look at is is it out there already? No. Okay, well then maybe I should start showing some of it. Um,
Yeah, I've been wanting to do the same thing with the brother because there's not a lot about probing and setting up stuff on the brother. So I
mhm.
definitely know what you're talking about. Um,
Yeah.
well, that'd be great. What is your YouTube? Wow, I didn't think you mentioned it in the beginning, just in case people want to follow along.
Oh, I didn't actually. Well, so if you do a search for Inspiration Metalworks, you'll find me. I've had that account because it was originally just my personal account. It's TJZELICK. I want to say I had it like 10 years ago. Actually, more than that, 15 years ago. Because I think the very first video I posted was right after I came back from Egypt. So that was what 2005, 2006. I mean, YouTube was really new, and it was all. I was still working for the university when I got that account because I used to work for North Carolina State University.
Oh, really? Okay,
So I was
cool.
telling you, I gave you the short version of the story, but yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah, your first video is Egypt Study Abroad 2005. So
yep. Yeah,
very cool.
I had taken a group of students. I was one of the, although I was also a student or doing it as a student. I yeah already graduated long before then, but working at the university, and so I was there in a dual capacity. I shot a bunch of video, and because I used to when I worked at the university, I managed smart classrooms and things like that, and I managed the language labs, so everything dealing with foreign languages, which is one of my things from the military and stuff like that. So yeah, once upon a time.
Well, very cool. Well, yeah, yeah, you should do some videos. I really want to see more about that Q-Tex because
Yeah,
I I think a lathe is in our future, possibly before another mill. I'm still undecided, but I really I think it would really Saunders has that class at AU about the easiest form of automation is a bar fed
yeah.
sub spindle lathe, and like if I could get even if it's not bar fed, even just a sub spindle y axis lathe, I think I'd
hmm
really be able to knock out some parts quickly and let it eat while I go program the mill or run the mill or something like that.
I got a little crash course on that with the Tormach because I've got the collet closer on it, and I got it before they had the automated ones, but I hooked up little pneumatic cylinders and stuff like that, and so the M code works and it just does it. But when I was making my magnets, because I haven't put anything out there about these things in a long time, but for a long time I was making these little shop magnets, and it was the first project I did on a lathe, anyways. Just little brass magnets with little neodymium magnets in there. But with the Tormach and with and then with the brother, I realized that I could really up my game, and so I figured out how to automate it. Put a 2 foot bar of brass in and press a button and get 24 um, magnet bodies out, and then throw it on the mill and deck it off and put my logo on the top and stuff like that. So yeah, I tell you, being able to, especially when you're small, 1-2 person operation, anytime you can automate things so you can focus on other stuff, it's huge. I get a part running so I can sit back down at my computer and I'm coding up the next part of it, or I'm putting a quote together for somebody else, or you've got to you wear a lot of hats. So yeah, the lathe would be good.
Yeah,
You
we'll
should do
see. I, I I
it.
definitely have been looking a lot at that MO8 SY that
Yeah,
Jake was
yeah,
talking about, but I'm more than happy to look at other brands too. I know
that's
that
Sagami,
my
right?
Yamazin, yeah,
Yeah,
Sugami. I know
yeah.
my Yamazin dealer would love it for me to say that I'm buying a Takasawa. So I'll see what they are offering too, and I'd love to see what Hwacheon has.
Yeah, and they've got a lot more on the West Coast actually. So you might have some good access there. I want to say they've got. I think their headquarters now for the U.S. is in Illinois, but I know like my lathe shipped from San Diego when it came. Now it could have just been the port that it came into, but um, yeah,
Seems like a lot of the brands are now having their home base in Illinois. I
yeah.
know Yamazen's out there too, and
Hmm.
I can't remember if DMG has an office out there, but like there was a ton when I was out there and visited Mari Tool. I was really surprised just driving past all of these big names.
Yeah, I was surprised too. I mean, it makes sense why IMTS is there typically. Because I kind of wondered at first, like, why is it always in Chicago? I mean, I like Chicago, and it's a great facility, but yeah.
Yeah, it does seem a little bizarre. So speaking of IMTS, Dustin asked Raven Rock Machine, "Do you think IMTS would have let you, Brett, and him in?"
Absolutely not. No.
Was he talking about this year?
Oh, I have no idea when he's talking about it. I'll catch him tomorrow and find out what he was saying. But yeah, Dustin's he's a trip, and he's having a little boy. I don't know if you saw his
I did.
post.
I saw. Congrats to him
Yeah,
and his
yeah,
family. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. They're great people. It's funny. Some of the guys that have put questions, like specifically Dustin and Brett, both. They both come over. They both help. They do all kinds of stuff. Everything from cleaning and rearranging shop stuff to helping design parts, helping teach classes. Those guys. It's kind of neat how when your you find your community. Um, it's it's kind of cool how it all just comes together. And I've known those guys now for it's coming up on 2 years, 3 years. Eesh, 3 years. But great guys. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely a little jealous of you guys. Having such a tight knit group out there. Like I've got Brad, my business partner, and Brad Southard, but that's really about it. That's in my immediate area. Like I've got my friend Nick is in Phoenix, and he comes down every now and again. But like there's close to me or that close, there's not that many people that I can kind of geek out as far as machining goes.
Well, how far away is Craig from you?
He's also in
He's in
Phoenix.
Mesa, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's more or less the mega city at this point. They're all
Yeah. Yeah.
swallowed into Phoenix proper, more or less. I still actually haven't met Craig in person. I'd love to go up and see his shop and check everything out that he's doing.
Yeah. I know he'd love to have you. He really would. So yeah, there's a lot around. It's getting plugged in. And believe it or not, I met these guys because of the Titans of CNC stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, going
Yeah.
back to that, actually, like I completely agree. Like, no matter how you feel about Titan, like whenever anybody asks me, "Oh, how should I get started in programming?" It's like, man, just check out his YouTube videos. Like, at least get started there. Regardless of how you feel about his personality, like he has dominated the online space as far as training go or free training goes. Like nobody else is doing that.
Well, not only that, but it's actually it's pretty good training. If you look at the way he's put the training together, it teaches an awful lot. There's a ton there. I think the missing link was that the small group thing. So you could learn all this, but until you put your hands on a machine and actually do it, and I mean, my heart rate still jumps up every time I'm proving out code. Um, but until you do that, it's not quite the same. Like you can learn how to draw the stuff, and you can learn how to program it. You think, but you don't really know until you're doing it. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. And I've met him a few times in person, and he actually is a pretty genuine guy. It's not just this weird persona, stuff like that. I frankly, there's some things he says that I'm just like, all right, come on. But as a person, I really like him. I think, and what he's doing, uh, and the fact that he can leverage it and make some money too. I don't begrudge him that. I think that's great. I mean, you can't give everything away. You have to be able to sustain that somehow. So that's fine. I don't mind that.
Yeah, yeah, and the network of the small groups does seem pretty amazing. The people you meet and the talent that you enable to like learn that stuff, because you're right. I mean, you can CAD and CAM to the cows come home, but like until you actually prove something out and know what the machine sounds like and know what end mills sound like when they're squealing and how to fix
Hmm.
it doesn't mean anything.
Well, and I think we've got it with the instant machinist community as well. But there's still, I think people are craving that sense of connection, and people want to learn. They really do. And machinists, junior guys, whatever, people want to get better. Even somebody, and he'll kill me for this, but like Brett, right? He's always looking for ways to learn something new and to be challenged. I mean, he's a tool and die guy. I mean, he knows his stuff, and yet he's always looking to improve himself. And there's this generational difference, I think, in some ways, not always, because I've seen it go across the board, but there's folks who are very, very protective of their knowledge because that's how they keep their job security. And there's folks who think, hey, if I don't pass this knowledge on, it's going to go away with me, and then nobody's going to have it anymore. And I'd much rather be in the latter group where we're all lifting each other up and trying to improve and help each other. And maybe you don't do it exactly the same way that somebody else does, but if you've learned that little tip or trick and it's improved things for you, and you take one thing out of it or two things out of it, hey, you've grown, you've improved, you've gotten better at what you do. And then you turn around and
Totally.
you share that with somebody else. So yeah,
Well, and
I'm
from the business side, I've rarely seen, I mean, unless you are doing a proprietary process that like nobody else can do unless they had your secret sauce. But for the most part, like your tips and tricks are not going to be the difference between you keeping a job and losing it. Like it's all of the other things that go into the business side of it that win you and lose you jobs. Like, do you deliver on time? Do you have good communication? Do you how do you interact with the engineers, things like that keep them coming back. It's not like, oh man, this guy has this one method that like I keep going back for. That's rarely the case. It's much more the business side that wins you and loses you business.
yeah. Well, to to expand on this and also go back to one of the other questions about the biggest struggle you've encountered recently. Um, I told you I started doing more work in the semiconductor industry,
Oh yeah.
and it's some materials that I've never worked with before. I mean, sintered silicon carbide and just some crazy stuff.
I was going to ask you about that because you use those 6C tools or
Yeah,
six
yeah,
something.
6C. The company is
Okay.
6C Tools. I want to say their Instagram is 6C underscore tools. Uh, they're based out of Zurich, Switzerland. And the thing is, so I was having problems. And, I tried, I only had to remove less than 5 thou of material. So I was thinking this was cake, right? I mean, when I first got the stuff, I could flake some of it, or some of it was flaking off on my fingernail. So I'm thinking, all right, carbide, maybe DLC, some coating on it or something, but no problem. So I go to run the first one, and it grinds the carbide away in about 5 seconds.
Oh my
Just
goodness.
destroys my end mill. I stop and I look at it, and I'm just like, oh my god. Just because, like, what do you do now? I start doing research, all this stuff, trying to figure out, what to do. So then I go to a DLC, a nice tool that I had, and it lasted one part.
Oh
Now we're talking 40 seconds, right?
yeah.
And I'm just like,
So
oh
like
my god,
$50 for 40 seconds or something like that.
exactly. And I'm like, I've taken on this job, and I've reassured everybody that I can do this, and oh my god, I'm screwed. So I started reaching out to folks, and I happened to see a post that Ed Kramer had had posted with his Datron. He was using this MCD, so monocrystalline diamond cutter. You're facing it and making these beautiful mirrors, right? So I reach out to him through Instagram. I'm like, hey, how's that working? Tell me more. I need some help here. I explain everything. And so he points me to Marv. And I know I'm using a bunch of other Instagram folks, but I hope everybody can follow along. These are much, much more well-known people than me. But so Marv over in Germany, right? So I reach out to Marv and I explain what's going on, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you need to talk to the guys at 6C." And but not only that, because Marv's brilliant, right? He's working on a PhD and all this stuff. He gives me speeds and feeds to use. He tells me which tools and gives me speeds and feeds to use. And I'm like, hey, I can't have any coolant on this either. He goes, all right, well, you got to do at least air blast and cut that speed in half. It's like, okay. I've done hundreds of these parts now, and thermal growth on the brother is greater than the wear on the tool.
Wow.
Like I was trying to figure out how long these tools were going to last. And so I'm running the tool, and I'm so for a little while I was doing, I guess, like every 5, I would touch off again, and I was keeping track of what my offset was, right? And then I noticed it stabilized. And then I noticed it dropped a little bit. It dropped a tenth. I'm like, wait, what? And it was kind of hovering around this same spot. And then I realized that, and then when it was cold and I took it again, I was smack dab at my initial tool offset from the first part. And it's like, this is all just the thermal growth of what's happening in the machine that's throwing it off. And remember, I'm only taking 5 thou off, so every 5 or so. But this is why a tool setter is so important to me, right? I want it to be able to just go in, check, go, keep going. But yeah, these tools. So I ended up going with a polycrystalline diamond, so PCD. And 6C is a really unusual way of making theirs. They use lasers to cut the flutes in. So right now I'm using I want to say it's a 6. Oh, I got a couple of them sitting in front of me. Let's see. This one is a 6mm. Yeah. So it's a 6mm tool, but it has 57 flutes.
What?
57 itty bitty little diamond flutes.
So what's the length of cut on that, or are you just like ramping down in Z to achieve your cut?
I was doing ramping. They actually encouraged me to just do a step over of like 30%.
Okay. And so how long is the flute on that?
On this one, it's a millimeter. I've got a 3mm one that has a 2mm depth of cut, and that one's only got 24 flutes. I'll have to go back and
Only
look at it
24 flutes.
Yeah, 3mm, 20. Yeah, exactly. And but it works. It's
right.
It's flawless.
So I remember you saying something on Instagram about how these were quite spendy tools. Roughly,
yes.
what do these cost? Like, what does a 6mm cost you? Are we talking $100? Are we talking $500?
Let's just say for the 4 tools, I'm in it for about $2,600.
Oh my goodness! So they better
Yeah.
last a long time, otherwise that job's not profitable.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing is yeah. This is one of those NDA ones where I can talk about some stuff, but yeah, it's a great project that I'm working on this one. Ultimately, all this will get handed off to the customer to run on their own later. So
Okay.
I'm just developing the process for them, and I mean, for now, I'm actually also doing the work until we get the whole thing, the equipment and all the stuff set up for them and training, and so I'm doing the entire end to end for them, and it's look at it this way: the tooling is a drop in the bucket for the cost savings that they're going to get.
Totally.
So when I told them about these tools, they're like, yeah, okay. It was about like that, right? And I'm glazed over, like, wait, what? And
Right. You're like, this is the most expensive end mills I've ever bought. What are you talking about? Okay.
this costs more than my first mill and my lathe combined.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah.
a pretty amazing. So are they the ones that you're selling the brother to? Or can
No,
you say?
no, no.
Okay.
Nope, that's going to that's just going. That's actually I can bring it up. So it's Matt Blackwell. It's Blackwell Engineering. Um, he does have. He's got Instagram. Or I know he's got Instagram because that's how we talk all the time. But yeah, pretty cool guy. Air Force pilot out in Washington State, no less. But he's got a Tormach. He's got an 1100, which has my sticker on it, which was kind of funny. He bought it from a mutual friend, and he was looking for another mill, and he was also looking at a Slant Pro, and um, we connected, and yeah, so package deal. He's gonna get the whole thing.
Oh, wow. That's great.
So I hope he doesn't mind me telling people that, but I know he posted the other day about waiting on the Slant Pro. So yeah,
I definitely think that, for a smaller shop, like the TC is I love my TC.
yeah,
Like
it's a great machine.
yeah, for what we paid for it and for what it is, like it's just quick and efficient. And it, I mean, I barely have to put comp on that thing, and it's a 20-year-old machine, 21-year-old machine now. And like, I have to comp it like a new mill, and it makes good parts all day. Like it just,
Yeah, I treat mine like a brand new mill. It's got no wear. It just runs. I finally hit a limitation on it because I've been doing. I did a die the other day.
oh, I
Um,
saw that. It looked really cool.
yeah, it came out really well. It's the guy that does motorcycle parts, so it's like case armor for dirt bikes.
Oh,
And
neat. Okay.
yeah, so it was really cool. I was excited to do the part. I just wanted to make the part. I didn't care if I made money on it or not. I just wanted to make that part. And two things that I noticed because I drip feed mine, and I think you and I don't know if we use the same tool for that or not, but I do it. I just drip feed everything. I've got a little USB key, just drop it in, go. And I actually saw it stutter a little bit because I was doing all kind. It was deceiving in the pictures, but that was all compound angles. Everything about that part was compound angles, and so it was all three-dimensional milling. And I watched it stuttering a little bit. It's the first time in 3 years that I've seen it do that. But
I've
yeah, it
definitely
was kind
seen
of
that
weird.
with some tighter 3D stuff, but like 3D adaptive or 2D adaptive, I've never seen it stutter roughing
Yeah,
at least.
no, I'd never seen it happen before. I mean, that thing just chews through whatever. But on this one, because I was doing a very very small step over, I learned a lot on this one. Um, I didn't get the surface finish I was shooting for because I didn't leave enough material, and the cutter didn't have enough to make good chips. Um,
Hmm.
I still got a really good surface finish. I just didn't get what I was shooting for. So yeah, next time I'll know a little better. But I tried a couple of different cam techniques that I hadn't used in the past as well. I sent my stuff over to Saunders because he's been doing these how would John do it things on video.
Hmm.
I don't know if he'll do it or not because this is I used a single tool for that whole thing. I
Oh
used
wow.
I used a half inch. I wanted to stress this thing, and I wanted to know a little bit about what this tool could actually do. It was one of the Kennametal Harvey ones. It's got a 15 thou corner radius on it, so but it was a half inch tool. It's got an inch and a quarter stick out, and I just let it chew, and it did the roughing and the finishing, um, and it came out great. And then after I had gotten all that, and I just needed to hog stock away from the excess so I could do stuff with it. I just used a little Char's face mill. I've got an APKT face mill that I was throwing sparks and all kinds of fun stuff. But it's a 90-degree face mill, and it can do shoulders just fine. So I just let it go to town. It was one of those things where it's like I didn't care how fast it got done. It just needed to remove 2 inches of steel.
Right.
So yeah.
Another one of those things you can just let it eat and go do
Hmm.
something else.
And the finish on it was almost a mirror. I was
Really?
shocked. I was shocked by it. Yeah,
Wow.
best finishes on the part came from that.
That's ironic for sure.
Yep.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Very
So on your stuff,
hmm
you know which question I'm going to ask, right?
Yeah, I do. From Ali
Yeah.
Skiti Daru.
Yes. He wants to
Um,
know, how are those windows on the kitty? You can't sell it if they're not replaced. I mean, you
so
could. You're
we
just not going to get as much. So,
we have it listed. I don't have any pictures of the windows because I have not replaced them yet because I still need to air up the machine so I can get it moving around and spray off the inside. The plan is I can't remember who I was talking to that gave me the advice, but right now it's completely dry of coolant. Like we have a layer of WD-40 and
mm,
Molly on it, so it's not going to rust or anything. But like all the coolant has evaporated pretty much. And so what I was trying to figure out is like, oh, how do I charge it up with coolant so I can clean it and make wash everything down. And somebody gave me the great idea of like, well, if you have to do a coolant change on your other mills, you might as well just use the leftover coolant from them and
oh
dump
yeah,
it in the kitty and use that as your wash down stuff. And then, you don't really feel bad about dumping it out. And then you got a place to, put all that coolant. So the plan, I don't know, sometime we went from like dead for a week to absolutely slammed in the shop in the last 2 weeks. But the plan is to dump all the stuff out of the TC and the Speedio into the kitty and use that as wash down liquid and wash down the whole inside. And then once that's clean, I can finally replace the windows because the last thing I want to do is replace them and then blow a bunch of chips against them while I'm cleaning the inside of the machine out. So
that makes perfect sense. And you know, I you're probably in the same boat that I'm at. The squeaky wheel gets the attention right now because you've got so many
mhm.
other things going on. Until somebody's coming to look at it, you're not going to do any of those things because it's just not convenient, right? I mean, you need the time to do it. Um,
Yeah,
so you gotta have that kick in the pants.
exactly.
Like
Yeah, I
like
cleaned
I
enough of the
know.
outside to like
Mm,
post pictures on Craigslist, and I was like, okay, that gives me some good pictures, some show off pictures, and then I'll let it sit for now.
right. All right. Well, I think that covered all of our questions, huh?
Yeah,
Anything we
yeah.
missed?
So let's. No, no. I didn't get any more, and I think that kind of covers it. I was going to ask you about the 6C tools, whether or not anybody else asked, because I was really curious. I mean, I kind of figured that you had talked to Marv because he's the only person I've seen on Instagram use them, and like he's kind of the expert now in milling carbide and ceramics and all that stuff, and so
Mm,
it's pretty epic. Oh,
yeah.
I did want to ask you. So, what kind of speeds and feeds are you running? Like, I would have no idea where to start with a diamond 24 flute tool. You know.
So the guys, so two things, right? So Marv gave me some recommendations, and then Jen's. So I don't know, I guess he's CEO of 6C. They're a small company. I think there's four guys, 4 or 5 guys. But he gave me everything I needed, right? They would spend the time with you because they know on these tools, particularly on this kind of tool, um, that they have to help you, right? You're not going to just know where to start. And so they gave some really good feedback. So these guys, if you go to their website and check it out, I know some of it's in Swiss German, but Google Translate is your friend. Chrome's got the auto translate for pages and stuff. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at it. But they, you know, they had worked at ETH, or at least one of them had worked at ETH Zurich, so a big university there. So they, so they already had this mindset of looking at different materials and the properties of these materials and how it worked. And so they found this niche where they're really good at it and they can help you based on your needs. But the general approach is much like we would do high feed milling. So you're not taking a lot of depth of cut, but you're engaging it quickly. Um, the let me bring up. Sorry, I got to bring up Fusion so I can look at what I'm doing for these.
No, no, I think it's well worth it. I'm
Okay, I don't have it
on their
in my.
website right now, and I was looking at their Instagram. I think yesterday, then they had
Mhm.
showed off a demo part of like some kind of glass that they had milled, which is just it's
Yeah.
crazy. Like the things that they can do seem so otherworldly. It's really it's cool to see. Not
Hmm.
only is it being done, but you're able to do it on a 20-year-old brother. Like that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So let's see. Um, because I'm limited to a 10,000 RPM spindle, um, because I'm doing it on the brother right now, I I am running at 108 inches a minute feed per tooth because remember it's 57 teeth, right? It's point 0.00019, so like 2/10 per tooth.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so that comes out to be about 600, roughly 620 surface feet. I'm trying to find. He's got a picture for me. Cutting tool advice. There's this. I want to. He sent me what his recommendations are. So that 3 millimeter one is going to be the one that. Yeah. So he was saying, okay. So in his email, he tells me the 6 millimeter one. Um, he's doing 188 meters per minute, and he's typically for silicon carbide. They're looking between 150 and 300 meters per minute. Uh, and then the 3 millimeter one is 20,000 RPM for the spindle and a feed rate of 100 millimeters per minute. I'm wondering if that's supposed to be millimeters per minute, not meters per minute, based on this
Yeah, I
email.
think so because I just
Yeah,
looked it up and I was like, that's
meters per
seven
minute is
thousand
just yeah,
inches a minute.
that's far too fast. So it's got to be millimeters per minute, and it was a typo that he's got in here.
Yeah,
Oh
that
no
makes more
no,
sense.
no, the meters per minute is our surface feet.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. That
Yeah,
makes
so
more
he's
sense.
he's looking for 150 to 300 meters per minute as surface speed, and
Gotcha.
then um, for the 6 millimeter one, he's shooting for 188 meters per minute, and he's saying a feed of so depth of zero point 0.1 millimeter. So width of cut 2 millimeter, depth 0.1 millimeter, and a feed of 70 to 80 millimeters per minute.
Okay,
And then
so
and
like
then the
four
smaller,
thou depth of cut, and then you
yeah,
30% step over. Gotcha.
yep.
Okay.
Um, And then for the smaller one, he's saying da, 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 so 0.5 millimeter for the depth of cut. That can't be right. No, that's width of cut.
Okay.
And then he's saying 100 millimeters per minute, but at 20,000 RPM. So they want this at 24,000 RPM for these cutters, and they definitely want at least air. Coolant would be better. MQL, so like a Datron. These are perfect tools for a Datron.
Right. 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 So what were you doing as far as air? Are you just sticking your hand in with the air gun, or
Yep.
okay?
Yeah. It's worked. It's worked well.
Yeah. 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 You can't knock what works for sure. That's really cool. Like I have zero need to like spend money on a tool that expensive right now, but man, I hope that a job comes up where I get to play around with them because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into shop new things. I mean, you already talked a little bit about your mill and your lathe and three phase, but what kind of work that if there's any that you can talk about, what's your current struggles besides diamond tooling, any other cool tooling or tool paths you've been trying out?
So, I think the big thing for me is just there's a lot more work. There's a lot of stuff coming in, and just juggling. I think we've kind of gone over a lot of the stuff, the mill and the lathe, and three phase, and um, it's more thinking about the business. I've actually had to turn work away lately because um, I couldn't get to it in time, not in the time frame that they were looking for, which I hate to do that. But I'm not going to take work on that I can't deliver on, and so I've put people in touch with other shops, but hopefully that comes back to me at some point. I think the big thing is I'm not trying to get to a point where I'm working 24/7, but balance is really important. But if I can get to a point where I've got a little bit more time during the day to get some of this stuff done, it'll make a big difference because I can run parts at night. What I can't necessarily do is call somebody about the part that they want at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So just when you have the time is just as important as having time.
I definitely know those struggles, or you have issues with a tool and you want to call the manufacturer, and you're like, oh, well, it's midnight, so they're not going to answer, and they're not going to get back to me till tomorrow. So I just got to make it work. It's rough. You like working by yourself in a garage or in your shop or whatever is already fairly isolating, and then being alone with nobody to turn to makes it only that much more so. So I definitely I know those feelings. One thing I wanted to ask you about, or see if you feel the same way, since we are both looking towards, in the near future going full time, do you feel stress? Like currently I feel a lot of stress when I turn away work, or when I have to, say that I'm not going to be able to deliver it on those time frames and see if they'll be able to work with me, because I'm going full time so soon. It's like I feel bad, and I feel like, oh, I should deliver and I should do all this just to make sure that I have, that extra bit of money, or that I have this work when I do go full time. Like, do you feel that stress as well?
Yeah, I do. I think it's one of those things where I would rather have a good reputation for delivering on what I say I'm going to do, um, than than have too much work and not be able to deliver on it. I know I'm definitely at that point where I'm looking at what's coming in. Like if I walked away from the day job today, I'd be in trouble. Plain and simple. Um,
Right.
and frankly, I think it's going to be a challenge for both of us as we, if and when we get to that point. Got to be a little nebulous about some of that, but having two incomes and then dropping down to one is going to mean a loss of income for a while. Um, it's not necessarily the end of the world because it frees up time that you can go out and get more work. But going into it with your eyes wide open, I think, is the important part. Because, so I was talking to my wife about it. It's like, it's going to get tight for a little while, probably maybe more than 6 months. Let's hope not, but it could take a little while. That being said, what I have found, and you've got to have faith in yourself, but because I know you're going to be fine, but it's harder to have faith in yourself. Like I know you're going to be fine, but I'm worried about it for me.
Right. And I
and
feel the exact same way about you. It's like, oh
Yeah,
man, Tom, you're gonna be fine. Like, but me on the other hand, I don't know.
yeah, and I look at it and I realize that the folks who are sending me work right now have a whole lot more work that they would send me if I said, okay, I can take on more work. And that is reassuring. Even though I don't have purchase orders hanging on the wall yet for some of this work, um, I know it's like this semiconductor stuff that I've been doing. They've basically said, how much more can you take? It's like, all right, let me get this stuff done. Let me get power taken care of, and then we can have that discussion again. So it's not booked work, but you'll get the work.
Right. Yeah. I've got a
Plain and
few
simple.
customers that keep asking me, like, what's your bandwidth? Like, don't let me overload you, but what's your bandwidth? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, just wait, and I'll have so much more bandwidth. Like,
Well, as long as you keep them. So the way that I would approach it, if I were you, and this is how I try to approach it. I don't always succeed in this, but I basically want to keep that reputation high, right? So I want them to keep asking me that because they want to send me more. If I'm taking on too much and I'm not delivering, then they're less likely to ask that question. So as long as they're still, as long as I'm still delivering a quality product, in a reasonable amount of time at a reasonable price, and they're happy with me, I'm sure there's more. Because I, are you advertising at all?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So neither am I. Everything that I've gotten is word of mouth. That means you've put zero effort into going out and looking for work, and you've got work. So,
Right.
what does that mean
Imagine if
for
I advertise. Yeah.
exactly? Or if you just got out and spent some time going to some other shops, talking to them, shaking hands, networking, you know, uh, I think that's going to be huge for both of us as we, move forward.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think that it's important to find like what your area's niche is too. Like I know you guys have a lot of motorsports out there and things like that. So I'm sure you can. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of those places have internal machine shops, but I'm sure there's also a lot of overflow and prototypes and things like that out there.
You'd think so. But I'm about 2 hours away from that, 2.5 hours away from that area.
Hmm.
I'm closer to our technology side of things. So I'm more likely to get biotech and semiconductor, and it's all the high tech stuff. So I live in an area near what's called Research Triangle Park. So
Oh, see, and I had no idea that he was even in North Carolina.
Cisco, IBM, Merck, Biogen,
Oh, geez,
Bayer, yeah,
giant companies.
yeah. That's where the overflow work, because I mean, they all have machine shops that it can't keep up, and so all the machine shops around here are basically trying to do a little bit more. It's funny because I was listening to one of the other episodes you were talking about ISO certification and stuff like that, and yeah, it'll definitely, that's one of those things that I'm considering. And for me, the other thing is defense. I've got Fort Bragg, and well, there's 3 military bases in North Carolina. There's another one or a couple of them in South Carolina. There's several in Virginia. So defense is real big around me. And as a disabled veteran, I get some priority on some of those contracts, but I've got to
Hmm.
be, ITAR compliant for that stuff. And I mean, I know I can sub in for some of those things, but it's like I will likely this year end up getting inventor,
Right.
because I won't be able to use Fusion for everything. And I use Fusion for everything that I do, from 3D printing to plasma to the mills and the lathes and just general design layout. I use Fusion for everything. Um, but yeah, that'll be interesting to see. But there's work. You just you gotta go and find it. And I think that's where a lot of folks aren't comfortable, especially machinists. Machinists like to run their machines, and
Hmm.
we like to run our mouths. Um,
Clearly,
but
I mean, I
yeah,
have a show so that I can run my mouth with other machinists. So,
exactly. But going out and playing nice in public to build these connections with other companies and things like that, not always our strong suits. So yeah, like I had to get it out of my head that sales is a bad thing. Like being a selling something is a bad thing, and it's not, right? Especially if you're solving someone's problem, right? It should be
right.
mutually beneficial. So yeah,
Yeah, I definitely, I understand what you're saying there. Like, I find that machinists in general, at least the ones I've encountered, are quick to brag to other machinists or bosses or something like that that they can do something. But the second it comes to like selling themselves to a potential customer or, you know, somebody outside of their sphere of influence, they all of a sudden clam up and they're like, oh, I'm a machine. That's it. Like,
well, hell, I have the same problem. I mean, you're like, hey, tell me about your company, and it's like, I got some machines and I do stuff. you know, it's hard, right? It's really hard to have that elevator pitch of, hey, what kind of things can you do? What are your capabilities? Heck, even the the inspector for my electrical stuff, he came in and he went, "You've got yourself a full machine shop here." And I was like, "Oh boy, here it comes." And he goes, I've got some work for you. And I'm like, whoa, wait, that's not what I was
Oh wow.
expecting. Yeah, he's a car guy, and he's got
Oh,
old,
cool.
an old pickup truck. And I've got this old C10, and he's got a 3100, and we're talking about different parts and all kinds of stuff. And yeah, it's like, oh, all right. So being able to say, oh, this is the kind of things that I can do to help you, is really really important. And I'm still terrible at that, but got to keep working at it.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think for a lot of us who started as machinists or makers or whatever, and then worked into a business owner, it's a continual journey. Finding out the things that you didn't go to school for, or that you didn't pursue as a kid. I know people who have been a salesman since they were 5 years old. Like whether or not they knew that at five, but they were a salesman, and that was not me. So
Yeah.
it's definitely been a learning experience.
Yep. Yeah, I tend to be very. Uh, well, I try to stay humble about things, and you've got to be able to brag about what you can do. Not necessarily, tact is still important, but you
Yeah.
have to be able to talk about, hey, these are the things that we can do. It's like I got to work on some tooling for an orthopedic surgeon at Duke Hospital, and it's like I still have this tooling because it's one time use kind of thing, and they gave it back, and I'm looking at this thing. It's like, wow, I helped make these tools, but the doctor helped this little girl walk. And it's like, wow, that's so cool. But how do you get to, how do you talk about that? I mean, I don't know. You know
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's especially hard when some of your work is under NDA. I mean, I'd say
yeah,
at this point, maybe 85, 90% of the stuff we do is all under NDA. And it's like, man, I can't share any of the cool stuff anymore. Like, there's so much that I do that I'm like, oh man, I would love to share, this surface finish or this tool path or this fixture. And it's like, I just can't, and it's a
yeah.
bummer, but, it's just part of the business.
I'm gonna start taking some of the best of what I do and put that into like either sample tools or like sample projects or just like personal stuff. I've got this truck and I need to, I can make parts for that and be able to show off some of the things that I've learned or some of the things that I've done that are under NDA, but because I take that knowledge and throw it on this other thing, it's not anymore, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think that's how I'm going to get around some of that because I take those very seriously. That's one of those things where you can definitely lose work real quick with that one.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's, again, that's the business side of things that can really lose you or win you work is how well you can abide by the contracts you sign and keep things secret that they want secret.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Very cool. It sounds like you're definitely well on your way to going full time. Then the work is there. We just got to get it.
Yeah, I think for me, I I made a pretty big commitment when I bought these two machines, um, and you know, it was not a decision I made lightly. I but I had all the pieces were in place, and it all looked right. So I knew I was making the right choice, and I knew it was something that I truly can just geek out over. Um, it's not just about like, oh, follow your passion and stuff like that. I mean, my passion's old motorcycles and old cars. I mean, it nudged me in this direction, but God, I love this stuff, and I could talk about it all day long. You know,
Same
but
here. Yeah.
yeah,
That is another thing actually I'm looking forward to when I do go full time is I'm sure that my days will be full of making parts, but getting my evenings back or the occasional free moment to make my own parts because like right now I'll see something I want to make, I'll design it in Fusion because I'm sitting at home, on the couch, and then I'll just never have the machine time or the willpower to go into the shop at, midnight to make my little G job of a car part or something like that. And so
yeah,
if I can get my customer work done during actual business hours, and maybe I can have a Saturday or a Sunday to go in and play for myself and make some fun stuff.
yeah. You gotta build that in. and you got to find a way to do that. I've been doing more and more of that sort of thing. We've been building a laser cutter uh, from because I've got an older Epilogue that's no longer functional at this point. I'm like, forget it. I'm building a new one for what it was going to cost to fix that thing. It's like, nope, I'm going way up over the top. So we're playing with that, and I do a lot of the electronic stuff that I don't normally show on on any of the channels and stuff like that. But I do have a background in that, but I don't. I just have fun with it a little bit. But the truck, that's going to be good, and my kids enjoy messing around with it, and that's been a lot of fun. My daughter's been getting in the shop more. She loves work. She loves running the sandblaster. It's hilarious.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I those GPS mounts I was talking about. The last step, I guess second to last step before I put the plastic. There's a Delrin cap that I put on it, but we got to get them ready for powder coat. And so I was like, all right, honey, there's 24 of them sitting there. Have at it. And she just goes to town. She'll be out. She'll throw her earbuds in, and typical. She'll be a teenager here in a couple of months, but she's already there. Um, Throws her earbuds in, and goes to town, and she just loves it. And puts a couple of dollars in her pocket along the way. So not a bad way to do it.
Not at all. No, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yep. But it's definitely a family owned and run business.
That's great. Yeah, that's definitely something that people want to support. So that's
Yeah. Yeah, it's all right.
fantastic. Well, very
Well,
cool. As always, I round out the episode by asking, what did you research this week?
I'm glad it wasn't book club stuff because I was just like, oh no, I haven't read that one yet. But I saw the change to the new one, so it gives me some time for that one. But so my big research right now, I've been focused on two different things. The first is business structure itself. I've been a sole proprietor all this time, and I know I need to restructure. So trying to figure out LLC or S corp, and the other part with that is realistically realizing that I need help with the administrative side of everything. So bookkeeping, the accounting side of it, trying to find a good lawyer in the area that can help me help answer those questions about the business structure. Um, and then honestly, I've been researching network equipment. I as part of what I do out here, I've got I teach out here. I do live streams from the shop, all kinds of stuff. But what I don't think a lot of people realize is, yes, this building is at my house, but it's at the opposite end of my property, and so I actually run a little point to point network from my house to get out here, and I've the network for me is really important. I mean, especially with fusion and everything else. So trying to tighten up my networking setup and security, things like that, because I've got multiple access points in the house. I've got the point to point between the buildings, and then I've got multiple access points in the shop, and trying to figure out the best way to manage all those things, intrusion prevention and all kinds of stuff, especially as I'm trying to segment things more. And again, going back to the whole um, uh, ISO and ITAR and things like that, like where do I store things? How do I store it? So
Right. Yeah, you
networking,
have to track people coming in and out of the shop, all that fun stuff.
yep. So looking at some of that stuff. So that's been the big things that I've been researching. What have you been working on? What have you been looking into?
Well, first, real quick. So, are you looking into Unify from
That's
Ubiquity?
exactly, yeah. And I
Uh
know
huh.
there's a big uproar with those guys right now because of the way that they're handling some of the user accounts.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, but it's more. I don't think it's as big of a deal as the way that people are positioning it. I think it has an impact on certain use cases, like some of the um, some of the guys that use it to manage remote accounts. I think like if for like a contract IT guy that might use it to support multiple businesses.
Hmm.
Some they changed the way some of the tools are so that it no longer allows you to have just a local account. You have to log in with their cloud account. So I know that
Oh,
that's yeah. From a security perspective, there's some folks who aren't going to like that. But frankly, for what I'm doing, I don't care. It doesn't affect me in the least. Um, but yeah, I'm looking at. It's funny because typically I wouldn't go all in with one company, but these guys have so much stuff from the cameras and I mean the switches, the routers, the access points, the cameras. It's all managed. It's got all this stuff. I'm looking at it going, gosh, that would make it easy.
yeah, I
Um,
know. I think Danny Rudolph posted that he was looking at or that he was working on his, and I
mhm.
went down the rabbit hole of looking into all their stuff and like, yeah, not only is it whole like the whole system is integrated, but it looks good. It seems like it's very user functional. It's very attractive. I definitely see why
Yeah,
people choose it.
yeah, and my day job is video, audio and video over IP. So
Hmm.
um, I work in the high end side of all that. So typically, I'm looking at like big Cisco type equipment and things like that, and to see the level of control and management and what you're getting in the feature set at the price point that Ubiquiti has for their stuff. I mean, I'm looking at it going, that's amazing. I could kit this entire facility out for less than the switch cost that's sitting on my welding table right now, running all this stuff on it. Seriously.
Yeah,
Um,
no, it is very
yeah.
attractive in price and skill or and features.
Well, and
It's
you don't have
pretty
to be a
impressive.
network engineer to run it.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it doesn't hurt to understand what you're looking at on some of that stuff. I mean, do I expect you to understand what an IGMP query is and, some of this stuff? No. But then again, you're probably not going to need to because all you have to do is check the IGMP enhancement, click done. There you go.
Right.
So yeah, there's cool stuff. And we've really gone off on a tangent on this isn't quite machine stuff, but it's the business, right?
Yeah. No,
Yeah, it's all part
I
of it.
I've said it and I'll say it again. I'm happy to just nerd out about whatever business related. Like this is
Yeah.
it's the stuff I'm interested in. That's why I asked this question is because it's not always machining stuff that we're all looking at. Like there's very often weird random stuff that we're all looking at that is just fun to talk about.
I was disappointed to hear that you weren't gonna do your the control for your fuel injection and everything for the car. I mean, I think it's cool that you're doing the engine swap and everything, but I was really hoping to learn a little bit more vicariously. Like, okay, how's he doing all this?
So we might not be doing that with my car, but I don't think I shared. The plan is to buy a mid '80s Isuzu Trooper
Oh, okay.
and one UZ swap it, which is the 4 liter V8 from the LS 400, the
Yeah.
Lexus.
Yeah.
And so we will probably end up using that on that motor.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So yeah, so I still have it. I'll still definitely relay any lessons learned and all that. But it's just been repurposed now because we realized that we needed a shop vehicle in the near future here, especially if I'm going full time and need to pick up material and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we also found out almost at the same time that the LS 400 bolts up to the stock transmission in the
Oh,
80s. That
okay.
like you just need a motor mounts pretty much,
That's
and
easy.
so yeah, it could be a lot of fun. We'll see, and we're definitely going to play around with it. We've been looking hard for one because personally, like my family, I grew up with an 84 85 Isuzu Trooper as our family vehicle for most of my youth, and so like I immediately Brad found all this research and brought it up to me. He's like, what do you think about this? And I was like, yes, immediately, yes. Like you don't need to go any further than a Isuzu Trooper. And then he told me all the rest of this, and I was like, even better, let's do it.
That's awesome. That's like me and rotary stuff or VWs. I'm a huge air cooled VW guy.
Oh
So
really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It reminds me though because I just started. doing some stuff. So we're still at the design stage, but I'm working with a local garage here that has started doing EV conversions.
Ooh,
Yeah. And so we've been working on designs for different heat sinks and mounts and all kinds of things. I'm probably, and none of this is under NDA at all. And so that's likely going to happen in the next couple of months where I'll start making parts for these guys.
that's awesome. That'll be
Yeah.
super cool.
And it's making me think about like, all right, what can I pick up that I can, like, I want to do one of these swaps.
I'm sure you could find a what is it, a 914 rust bucket, and that would be a nice little fun light.
Brett.
Uh,
Oh, you want to talk about a nice 914? So Brett, machinist Brett, right?
mhm.
He's got a 914 wide body with a 911 motor in it that's just sitting.
Actually, I think I commented on his picture of it
Yeah.
because the track I used to work at, there's a track maybe an hour from here in Wilcox that is like a it's like a I want to say like a very wealthy person's like you can buy a or rent a unit and you're a member and like it's a
Mm.
members only track. And my favorite part of it is most of the guys out there have Ferraris and Lambos and $150,000 plus cars. But one of the members had a 914 that was rusty and looked like an absolute garbage car, but it was LS swapped,
Oh, jeez.
and he would just wreck all of these Ferraris down like throughout the corners, the straights, no matter what. Like his power to weight was so insane. He would just destroy all these guys and they would come in so beaten because this thing that looks like it costs 2 grand maybe would just destroy them in their brand new, 812 Ferrari or something like that. And it's like it was the funniest thing ever.
But those are the kinds of things that give people hope, right? I mean, you don't have to have $1 million to go out and race and have fun. I mean, look at they used to, I don't know if they still do it, the old first gen RX-7 stuff. They had SCCA used to have an entire series that was just first gen RX-7s, but the 13Bs are getting harder to find. I think it's
Mhm.
been replaced by Miatas. Right? You buy yourself a '97 Miata. If you can find a '98 with a long block in it and go. I mean, a couple $1,000 and you're in, and just go have fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of those early or mid '80s cars are just fantastic, and like the early '90s Miatas, yeah, they're super cool. My one of my really good friends had I want to say it was an FB RX-7 that
Hmm.
he V8 swapped and turboed,
Jeez.
and it still to this day is one of the most frightening cars I've ever driven. Um, but it was banana. I think he made 500 wheel and like 575 torque to the wheels,
In a car that weighed what 2,400 pounds, wet.
something like that. Yeah.
Well, with
Well,
that
and
motor in
like
it, it was probably closer to 27. But yeah, it's
it was
ridiculous.
it was bananas. Like and the funniest part of it is that he had like I want to say he had a stock clutch and a stock gearbox in it, and the only reason he never blew up the gearbox was because it was a stock clutch and would slip before he could do any damage to the rest of the driveline.
Oh,
Um,
that's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. Oh man, yeah. No, these days I've let that go. I had a '93 FD, had an R1 model. I loved that thing, but these days I'm more along the lines of put the whole family in the car and go for a drive or something. I've been looking at an old Thunderbird, like a '65 Thunderbird. I mean,
Ooh, cool.
it's got all the aviation styling to it still, like the T handle for the handles for the like thermostat and stuff, and all these little things. My family thinks I'm insane, because I'm always looking at these old cars and trucks and stuff, and they just see these, you know, nasty old cars and trucks, and I'm looking, at all these little details and stuff. But for now, it's get the C10 done. The LS swap's almost done. Um, that'll be, and then it's just make it look as good as it runs, because everything mechanical will be done at that point. and then it's time to address the rust bucket of a body.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you LS swapped that.
Yeah, well, I had a 305 in it from like a 76 El Camino, so it could almost get out of its own way, but not quite. It's on a. I mean, to be fair, this thing is on a K5, so like a 72 K5 Blazer frame, so it is four wheel drive. It's not a traditional 66 C10. Um, so between that and the 205 transfer case and the gearing and 31 inch tires and stuff like that, the 305 was struggling,
Hmm.
because that 305, that model 305 is the Malaise era, emissions era 305. So it's the real
Right.
small. It's the small bore 305. It's not the larger bore 305 that like from a 350 or something like that. Um, so yeah, it struggled. I think it was supposed to make 140 horsepower.
I was gonna
Um,
say it makes like a inline four amount of power, like modern day inline four amount of power.
Well, I've got a 1990 GMC pickup, long bed that I use for the shop
Hmm.
stuff. It's got the 4.3 liter V6 in it, and it's more powerful than what that 305 was.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, but the LS with that, and we're swapping the transmission from the TH350 to a 4L60. So I'll get an extra gear, all kinds of good stuff. Moving
So
the
is it
tank.
actually an LS or is it a LQ for my truck?
Um, well, that's a good question. It's probably an L. Well, no, it's an LS.
Is it an iron block or aluminum?
Oh, that must be the LQ then, because it's iron block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which are even better. I mean, I've seen, not that you're going to do it, but I've seen quite a few 700-800 horsepower
Oh
stock
yeah.
block
Yeah.
LQs. So,
Yeah. So it's a 5.3. I left it completely stock. It's got 100,000 miles on it. Um, the uh, the donor vehicle was, I knew the owner. I knew how they drove it, and it's fine. I'm not worried about
yeah.
it at all. I But it meant moving the tank, and it's because that was still when they had the gas tanks in the cab with you.
Hmm.
My kids like to come with me, so we're adding seat belts, stuff like that. Um, yeah, so I'm excited. It's where what I'm what I'm most afraid of is that all this stuff is going to hit at the same time. The power will get done. I've got the machines will come online. The truck will get done, and then I won't be able to drive it because I'll be so busy doing all this other stuff. And, um,
Right.
but yeah, it'll be good.
So, as a quick aside to our aside, if
Mm.
anybody is interested in seeing the limits of these motors that we're talking about, like your LQ or whatever, I don't know if you've ever seen Richard Holdener
Oh
on
God, I love
YouTube.
him.
So he does these, for anybody who hasn't seen him, he does these Big Bang series on his YouTube channel
Yes.
where he takes a stock block and gives it a little more ring gap and sometimes gives it a new intake and just puts on a eBay turbo and turns up the boost until these things blow up. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well,
it
did you see
is,
the 500 Cadillac that he did?
I don't think I did, but I'll have to watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. Go back and look at that 500 Cadillac. But he does all kinds of stuff too. Like it's not just the big motors. He does. I think recently, like last month, he was doing some Hondas, and so yeah, was it
Yeah,
B18s? Um,
it's worth the watch. It's crazy cool, and like he just really puts to rest a lot of rumors of like, oh well, this engine can only hold this much. It's like, well, no, you spec it right, and you can make the moon and back as far as power goes.
yeah, but also things like hey, which camshaft should you have? I don't know, the one that you have, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot of really, really good stuff. Yeah, yeah, I enjoy it a lot.
definitely.
Hmm.
And the other thing I'll slide in there is the thing I've been researching the last couple weeks, and it's all due to Brad Southard. Is that I've been looking at Voron 3D printers, which are
Oh,
it's an open source design. This conglomerate of like engineers and people that have designed this, and it's a Core XY printer. So the belt, drive XY, and they are just like super cool, amazing looking design. and all the plans are open source. That you can go on their website and configure one, and they'll give you a bill of materials and links to where to buy stuff with affiliate links and all that stuff. And it runs off of Clipper firmware, which is I guess there's no real competitors. I don't know if anybody's actually making money off of Marlin or anything like that, but it is another firmware in opposition to Marlin and things like that, where it actually runs all of the G code processing on a Raspberry Pi and then
Oh,
pushes that to the stepper boards.
nice. This is
Yeah.
cool. I just looked it up.
Yeah.
So it's borondesign.com, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to build, I think I'm going to build one of the biggest ones, which is the 2.4, and it goes up to 350 millimeters. And, like I love my Ender and it works well, but like I would love something that's enclosed. Like it's designed, even with a filter fan in the back and a carbon filter. And I'd love to just be able to print ABS and things more reliably and quickly.
Have you had luck printing ABS? Any
I
issues?
haven't even tried. I if I need something strong, usually I go to PETG just because I can print it without an enclosure.
You know what? I've printed a bunch of ABS on my Prusa without an enclosure.
Really?
I do have
And
the heated
no
bed though.
warping?
Do you have a heated bed?
Yeah, yeah, I've got a
Yeah.
heated bed.
Yeah, I haven't had any problems.
Okay, well maybe I'll have to give it a shot.
Yeah, it's worth it. I mean, for the 30, $40 you might spend on a spool of filament, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, I mean, I use the stock settings for ABS, and it's printed great. I did a bunch of car parts actually, so like door pulls and stuff like that for
Oh,
guys.
cool.
And I actually
I've
some of the parts that I use for this big job, I was the 6C tool stuff are I use ABS for some of the hold downs.
Oh, neat.
Yeah,
That's really cool. Yeah, I
it's
wouldn't imagine that there's much cutting force with that small of a depth of cut and stuff.
no, actually, it was quite the opposite of what I was what you normally end up doing. I'm using stuff that will flex to prevent over tightening because this stuff is brittle and it can crush. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't even think about that. That would be terrible.
exactly. Yeah, and it's the idea is to get it to where anybody can do the work, not just me. So I'm trying to make it foolproof. So I made clamps that will flex. It gives enough pressure to hold it in place, but it flexes so that you can't over tighten it, and then you'll bottom out the thumb screw before you'll over tighten it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The other thing I've been wanting to try on my printer, but I need to get a filament drying box for it, is
Hmm.
I've really been interested in carbon impregnated nylon because I've heard really, really good things about that. And all I have to do is really replace my nozzle with a hardened steel one so it doesn't
Hmm.
just wear away in half a spool or something like that.
The Ruby ones work well for that too, I think, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I totally
Yeah.
forgot that they made those.
Yeah. Nylon is harder to print, from my understanding, because it doesn't stick to the beds as well. But otherwise, I think it should be fine. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's
I've
supposed to
never tried it.
it's supposed to be insanely strong compared to the rest of the normal
Hmm.
PETG, PLA, ABS, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm gonna work on it, and the Voron just seems like a fun project in general, and like the Ender is no looker, whereas the Voron, I mean, it's a good looking printer. Like I would not mind having that on my desk where. If people
Yeah.
come over, I kind of want to hide away my Ender because it doesn't look very good.
See, I don't know. The reason why I got the Prusa was it was a lesson from when I did my CNC conversion to my little mini mill. Um, I didn't know a heck of a lot about 3D printing to begin with, and I had a kit and I'd gotten it working and I was printing, but I had a lot of problems. And what I was trying to avoid was the question of, is it the user or the machine that's causing the problem?
Hmm.
Um, and so that's why I went with a well-known, pre-designed, should just work out of the box kind of thing. Um, but this one looks pretty cool. And now that I know enough, it's just like, makes me wonder. But there's some of the features of like the Prusa that I love. I mean, it automatically adjusts if your stuff's out of square, if it's not totally level, it just fixes it in the G code. Or it does a work coordinate offset basically.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
if you're not level, it just fixes it for you. You don't need to worry about it. Um,
So I'll send you a video and I'll try to post it in the show notes if I remember. The big Voron that I was telling you about, the 2.4, it
yeah,
actually will do full automatic gantry leveling to the bed.
really
So because it has all four corners controlled, it'll actually take points with its little touch setter, similar to how the Prusa does, and then you'll actually see the gantry level itself to the bed, in addition to doing any G code offsets if it needs it. But I'll find the video and send it to you because it's the first time I saw it, I was like, oh man, that's cool. Like I just want it just so I can watch that happen.
yeah. I'm This thing is cool though. Like I've been looking at it while you know, since you brought it up, and it's just, I mean, even the web page is like, okay, it'll step you through configuring it and then give you a source guide, and this is amazing.
it's
Like
it's
these
really
these are
interesting
all
the
the
way they
parts
do
that
it
you
too.
need, and yeah,
Well, and like so if you build it, you then submit on their Discord a video of it running, and like they have certain requirements that you have to have done before you submit your video, and then they'll give you a serial number. So they've actually serialized all the ones that they approve out in the wild. Um,
nice.
yeah, so it's kind of an interesting like open source and yet community based like. Oh, your serial number so and so, and you've upgraded through this and this and this, and it's like a way to track revs and all that stuff.
They've got the F3D file available. Like you
Yeah,
can just down. Wow,
yeah. I
this is
downloaded the
cool.
whole thing, and
Yeah.
it's got some slight issues. Like you need to move some parts around because nothing's jointed.
Oh
So,
man. Okay.
but everything's there, and it's like it's all in subfolders and subcomponents, and like as far as file organization goes, it's actually really well done. So
Hmm.
I'm super excited, and they've got one that's like the Prusa or the Ender that's called the Voron Switchwire. That's an XZ or Core XZ one
Hmm.
instead of a Core XY. That I think you could probably even convert an Ender 3 to it with enough work and printed parts, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. This is very cool. It's a good manual. Everything about it.
Yeah.
This would be a good case study on bringing a product to market. Like, what are all the things that you need to do? Oftentimes, we just say, "Oh, hey, I want to make this product. I'm going to sell this. I'm going to sell millions of this product. I'm going to get rich." Right? But there's so many little things that you don't think about. It's not just like, let's take my magnets for example, or a top or something like that. Right? So you come up with the design and you figure out how you're going to make it. But that's just like the first step. On
Yeah.
getting it into people's hands. This, I mean, when you look at these guys, this would be like a great case study. You just look at, okay, well, what are all the things that they did? They got the website, they've got the models in here, they've got really nice manuals, they've got all this stuff. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
It's really cool. And like the way they structure it, like a lot of the upgrades and updates through the models come from users who submit on the Discord or things like that. Either modifications they've done or things that they think should be modified. And so it's very community based, and they really like, I think they say on their website somewhere that, they're trying to make a professional level printer for a somewhat affordable price. Like I think you're still going to end up spending close to $1,000 on the big one. Um,
Hmm.
After everything's all said and done. And like, granted, I can probably do it for a little cheaper because I have a machine and can do things like that. But um, yeah, it's just cool. Like I saw it and Brad turned me on to it, and he's built two now, I think. And the second he kind of explained it all to me, and I started going down that rabbit hole. I was like, oh man, this is what I want. Like this is cool.
Oh, I got another rabbit hole for you. Have you
Okay.
seen the Cars and Cameras YouTube channel?
Cars and cameras. I don't think I have.
Yes. Okay, new rabbit hole.
Oh, great.
And the secondary one, so one of those guys has his own channel, so Isaac, it'll be fine. But yeah, new rabbit hole.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I just quickly brought him up, and the first thing I see is a four-engine all-wheel drive go-kart.
Yes, that's
That
their old
sounds
one
insane.
though. They, those guys are local to me too. I haven't met up with them yet, but so one of them lives like an hour east of me, and one of them lives like an hour west of me. But yeah, um, I, I'm looking forward to actually, hanging out with these guys someday.
Yeah, you'll definitely have to make that happen and take some video because it seems like some epic stuff will happen for sure.
Yes, yes, indeed. Well,
Well, that about wraps it up. Thank you so much for coming on, Tom. I really appreciate it. It's great to get to nerd out with especially somebody whose story is paralleling mine very closely. It's nice to commiserate and you know talk about our stresses. So I really appreciate that.
this was a lot of fun. I thank you very much for the opportunity. I I was actually kind of surprised when you reached out to me, so thank you. I do appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for coming on. And for everybody listening, as Tom mentioned and I mentioned, we've got the book club going back again. I've got AJ from Design the Everything coming on. We're recording next week, but it'll be on in 2 weeks to talk about The Purple Cow by Seth Godin. It's a real short book. I think it's 150 or 165 pages. It's on Amazon. It's also on Audible. I'm listening to it right now. I'm about halfway through. Go ahead and pick it up if you can. Read through it, and we'll talk about it for almost an entire episode. We'll go through AJ's backstory as well, but we will talk about that for. I'll talk through the entire book, and that's the new way we're going to do the book club. And then we will probably circle back and finish Traction the following month. So thanks everyone for listening. Thanks Tom again. I really appreciate it, and everybody have a great night.